The room went completely silent the moment the woman in the red dress sat down in the chair that had always belonged to the wife. She crossed her legs, smiled as if she had every right to be there, and reached for the champagne glass beside the dinner plate. Across the long dining table, 78-year-old Margaret Whitmore stared at her with disbelief. Then Grandma slowly pushed herself to her feet, gripped the edge of the table, and shouted so loudly that every conversation stopped at once, "Get up!" Nobody moved. Not the woman. Not Margaret's grandson, Andrew. Not even Andrew's wife, Clara, who stood frozen near the doorway with tears already filling her eyes. What happened next would expose a secret that had been hidden for months and change the family forever. If you believe kindness, loyalty, and second chances can change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories. It had been supposed to be a celebration. The Whitmore family had gathered at their large home outside Charlotte, North Carolina, to celebrate Margaret's 78th birthday. For more than 50 years, Margaret had been the heart of the family. She had raised 3 children, survived the loss of her husband, and spent decades teaching her grandchildren that family was not about money, appearances, or social status. It was about who stayed when life became difficult. Her favorite seat at family dinners was at the head of the table, but beside her was another chair that everyone knew belonged to Clara. Clara had been married to Andrew for 6 years. She was 34, gentle, hardworking, and never interested in the family's wealth. Before marrying Andrew, she had worked as a school counselor and continued working even after their marriage. She remembered everyone's birthdays, visited Margaret every Sunday, brought groceries when Margaret's knees hurt, and quietly paid for repairs around the old house when she noticed something needed fixing. She never asked for recognition. But during the previous year, Andrew had slowly changed. He began coming home late, keeping his phone locked, and finding reasons to leave the house on weekends. Clara noticed the distance but kept hoping it was stress from his business. Whenever she asked whether something was wrong, Andrew assured her that everything was fine. Clara believed him because she loved him. What Clara did not know was that Andrew had become involved with a woman named Vanessa Cole, a sophisticated 30-year-old real estate consultant who had recently entered his professional circle. Vanessa was beautiful, confident, and fascinated by the lifestyle Andrew's family could provide. Andrew had convinced himself that his marriage was already failing, even though Clara had never been told that their marriage was in trouble. Then came Margaret's birthday dinner. Clara had spent the entire afternoon preparing a homemade apple pie because Margaret loved it. She arrived at the house early, carrying the pie carefully in both hands. But when she walked into the dining room, she saw Vanessa sitting beside Andrew. Clara stopped. Vanessa was wearing an elegant red dress. Her purse rested on the floor beneath the chair that Clara always used. Her hand was casually resting near Andrew's, and the two looked completely comfortable together. Andrew stood up quickly and tried to explain that Vanessa had been invited because she had helped with an important business project. Clara looked at him without saying anything. She did not need an explanation. The expression on his face told her more than words ever could. Margaret watched Clara's face change. Clara quietly placed the pie on the kitchen counter. She forced a small smile and said that she was sorry for being late, even though she had arrived exactly when she had promised. Then she turned toward the dining room. That was when Vanessa took Clara's seat. She did it casually, almost deliberately. She pulled the chair closer to Andrew and settled into it as though she had been sitting there for years. Margaret's eyes narrowed. The room became painfully quiet. Then Margaret stood. Her voice shook with age, but the authority behind it was unmistakable. She pointed toward the chair and shouted, "Get up!" Vanessa looked stunned. Margaret continued, telling her that the chair was not simply a piece of furniture. It represented the woman who had sat beside the family through sickness, funerals, celebrations, difficult years, and ordinary Sundays. She reminded everyone that Clara had never abandoned them, even when she had every reason to feel unappreciated. Andrew tried to interrupt, but Margaret raised one hand. She told him that he had made a terrible mistake by confusing excitement with love and convenience with loyalty. She said that Vanessa was not the problem sitting in that chair. The real problem was the man who had invited her to take it. Clara could no longer hold back her tears. She finally admitted that she had suspected Andrew was seeing someone. She had found messages, noticed the lies, and even discovered that he had been planning to move money from their joint account. But she had kept silent because she wanted to believe the man she married was still somewhere inside him. Andrew lowered his head. For the first time that evening, Vanessa looked uncomfortable. She realized she had been told a very different version of the marriage. Andrew had made Clara sound cold and distant. He had claimed they were practically separated. He had never told Vanessa that Clara still cooked his favorite meals, visited his grandmother, and had spent weeks helping Andrew recover after a serious illness the previous winter. Margaret looked directly at Vanessa and softened her voice. She told her that she was welcome to leave without shame, because the real shame belonged to the person who had betrayed his vows. Vanessa stood slowly. Before leaving, she looked at Clara and apologized. She admitted that she should have asked more questions before becoming involved with a married man. Then she walked out of the dining room. Andrew remained standing beside the table. Margaret told him that he still had a choice, but it was not the choice he wanted. He could continue protecting his pride, or he could finally accept responsibility for what he had done. Andrew looked at Clara and apologized. Clara listened, but she did not rush into his arms. She told him that an apology could open a door, but it could not erase what had happened. Trust would have to be rebuilt slowly, if it could ever be rebuilt at all. That night, Clara left the house alone. The following weeks were difficult. Andrew moved into a small apartment and began counseling. He stopped blaming Clara and started confronting the selfish decisions he had made. Margaret refused to let him hide behind excuses. She told him that becoming a better man was not something he could announce. It was something he had to prove through his actions. Clara focused on herself. She returned to work with renewed purpose and began spending more time with friends. She visited Margaret every Sunday, as she always had. Slowly, the pain became less sharp. Months later, Andrew showed up at Margaret's house with groceries. He did not ask Clara to take him back. He simply helped Margaret carry the bags inside, fixed a broken cabinet, and left. He did the same thing the next week. And the week after that. Eventually, Clara noticed that Andrew had stopped trying to impress everyone. He was simply becoming dependable again. One Sunday afternoon, Margaret invited both of them for lunch. Clara entered the dining room and stopped when she saw the familiar table. The chair beside Margaret was empty. Andrew stood several feet away. He did not pull the chair out for Clara. He did not assume she would sit there. He simply waited. Clara looked at Margaret. Margaret smiled gently and tapped the chair. Clara sat down. It was not a promise that everything was forgiven. It was not a guarantee that the marriage would survive. It was simply a reminder that Clara deserved respect, and that she would decide what happened next. Andrew sat across from her. For the first time in many months, there were no secrets between them. The dinner was quiet at first, but eventually Margaret laughed at something small and ordinary. Clara smiled. Andrew smiled too. Sometimes, the most powerful moment in a family is not when someone wins an argument. It is when someone finally stands up for the person who has been silently hurting. Margaret's famous command that night, "Get up," had not really been about a chair. It had been about dignity. It had been about reminding everyone that a person's place in a family should never be stolen by arrogance, deception, or betrayal. And Clara learned something she would carry for the rest of her life. Sometimes losing the person you love is painful, but losing yourself to keep someone else happy is far more painful. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in loyalty and second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us that kindness and courage still matter. Special request: before you leave, comment, "Dignity always matters," if you believe every person deserves to be respected, especially when they are hurting in silence. And as Clara walked beside Margaret that evening, she finally understood that the chair had never been the most important thing at the table. The most important thing was knowing that, when the moment came, someone would stand up and remind you that you still belonged.